The other problem I had on Sunday, having recovered from again walking the dog, was that I then sat down and watched a Jack Tame interview on TVNZ's, they call it the flagship current affairs show. It's the only current affairs show they've got, Q&A, which isn't really a current affairs show. It's just somebody asking some questions, and in this particular case, in a fairly tame and passive way. The guest was a man by the name of Eru Kupa-Kingi, and the first thing I thought, obviously, was, oh my God, he looks just like Benjamin Doyle. There's a whole series of swirls over his face. I know that's very impolitic and uncultural, but it just reminded me of that. I thought, gosh, aren't swirls a feature of this week and what they mean? Well, Eru Kupa-Kingi had them all. Anyhow, apparently they are cultural, as distinct from Benjamin Doyle, where they're just made up. And I wonder if he'll come back to Parliament this week. No, of course he won't. Anyhow, Eru Kupa-Kingi is not just the son of the Te Pāti Māori MP, but he was the organiser of the Toitu Teiterengi, or Toitu Teiteriti Tikoe, which was quite prominent in terms of opposing the Treaty Principles Bill, and which you all would have seen on your television screen, and got slavish attention from the mainstream media as it passed through New Zealand. And he decided to enter Sunday's Q&A with Jack Tame. Listen, it was one of the most tamest interviews I've ever seen in my life, but it didn't stop Eru Kupa-Kingi demonstrating why Māori activism in this country may not necessarily be the danger that we all think it is. Because if you listen to the interview with Eru Kupa-Kingi, you would have been immediately convinced, I have to say, that a functioning neuron, any functioning neuron, emanating from that quarter was unlikely to be troubling the person who's meant to be having the functioning neuron, or anybody who's the recipient of action. Eru Kupa-Kingi demonstrated to me that he didn't actually understand anything. It wasn't just the English language, it was anything. He didn't know what equality meant, and then he sought to define what equality was. It depended, apparently, he said, it depended on whether you were tangata whenua or settlers. Now, he immediately made that distinction straight off on the show. You were immediately tangata whenua, and therefore equality meant something different to you, or you were settlers. Now, settlers is a word that you use to describe people who don't really belong here, but you can't say that. So you use the word settlers to draw the distinction between them and yourselves. It's a bit like Kylie Quince, the Auckland University professor, who says that migrants to this country shouldn't have an opinion. Mind you, if I looked like you, Kylie, I'd probably hate the world as well. He then went on to say, Eru Kupa-Kingi, that, and he said this on a number of occasions, that the tangata whenua are putting up with 200 years of oppressed rights. And I went, I'm going back to 1825. It's the midst of the musket wars. You're all killing yourselves with, admittedly, rather poor European muskets. But so apparently since 1825, Maori have been oppressed in this country. In that particular case, I would have said by themselves, but there you go. And then when asked if he wanted a separate Maori parliament, he said, well, we won't know until we get there, which was a strange reply, really. Mind you, it was the same reply he gave to whether or not he wanted separate Maori banks and separate Maori sovereignty, which he'd all said he wanted, and separate Maori supermarkets. So when Jack Tame asked, well, what will these look like? Well, we won't know until we give it a try or we get there. And then finally, I liked the bit in which he said, when asked, well, what's it going to look like when we get there? His question in 2040, you want to get to separate Maori sovereignty, you want to get to separate Maori supermarkets, you want to get to separate Maori banks. And when asked, well, what by 2040, he was asked, well, what's it going to look like in 2040 then? Just give us a sort of an outline of your vision, please. And he gave one of the great sentences in reply. These conversations are not only happening, they're a real thing. That was his answer to the question. These conversations are not only happening, they're a real thing. Honestly, you didn't have to listen to too much of that conversation with Eru Kupa-Kingi to go, I don't think these guys could get themselves out of an intellectual paper bag, let alone construct an entirely new country. And I'm not so sure, after all, that Maori activists are a danger or an endangerment if the Eru Kupa-Kingis and their logic, their intelligence, and their rhetoric are as demonstrated. I suspect their best effort for the next 15 years is just moaning, moaning and moaning and moaning, and hope that the moaning fills their pockets with, well, to be honest with you, guilty settlers who feel that maybe you've got a point and just give them more money to keep them moaning, a bit like the fairground clowns with their mouths open all the time. What do you think?